Hello, everybody. Welcome to MHTV. Really pleased to have you with us tonight. And we want you to be joining in as well, because we're talking about a really interesting subject. We're talking about social justice, particularly as it relates to mental health. So let me hand over to Dave before we get going so that we can really think about how you guys join in with us. Dave?
Hi, thank you, Nicky. Hi, everyone. As always, it's great to have you joining in tonight. And there's a couple of really easy ways how you can join in to the conversation. So the first one is on the Facebook live chat. So next to the video, there's a space where you can write your comments or your questions, your thoughts. And obviously, we'll try and bring in as many of those as we can tonight. The other option you've got is on Twitter, and all you need to do is to include the hashtag MHTV. We'll see all of those tweets, and again, we'll bring those into the conversation. But without further ado, straight back over to you, Nicky.
All right, so let's introduce our fantastic guests tonight. So first, we have Jamie. Jamie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jamie Komeh. I'm a lecturer at the University of Brighton in mental health nursing. One of my areas actually that I'm very much interested in is people's development. So this subject is really close to my heart. And one of my roles as well is in student recruitment as an admission tutor. So I do participate in certain activities to ensure widening participation in our recruitment processes, which is also a policy for our university. Thank you. Yep. Thanks for meeting you all.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucy?
Yeah, hi. I'm a colleague of Jamie's. I work as a lecturer at the University of Brighton. This subject, for me, I suppose first spoke to Nicky about it was about a year ago, maybe. Thinking about social justice in terms of mental health nursing, and my specific part that I play is with our third year mental health nursing students, and we think about specific groups in relation to protected characteristics and the Equality Act and social justice. So I'm really happy to be here and talking with you.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Warren.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Warren Stewart. I'm also a senior lecturer at Brighton. I think you probably guessed that we all work together. I'm a module leader and have a couple of other little roles within the uni. From a practice perspective, I hail from a nursing and justice background. That's kind of another kind of justice, I guess, but we might get onto that. And again, in year 3, I work with students to stimulate critical thinking, critical discussion, critical reflection, and that very often relates to social justice issues. So as per Lucy, I think that's kind of where we might lead to.
Definitely. So I guess the first thing to do would be to actually get a real handle on what we mean when we're talking about social justice. So does anyone want to jump in on that one? What do we mean by social justice?
I think we have, go Jamie.
For me, what social justice stands for or what it means, it's a broad area. But for myself, what I actually align it with is fairness in the society, wherein everybody has the chance, the opportunity to live their life in a very good way, or in a manner that they will want to live their life, wherein they are not disadvantaged in any way by certain norms or barriers that are created within the communities that they live.
Do you want to add to that, Lucy? It's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, often, particularly in terms of mental health and mental ill health that people experience, I think much of social justice is around the very micro stigmas that people experience and discrimination on a very minutiae level in day-to-day living. So I think for mental health nursing, we're often thinking about social justice in how it impacts on us minute to minute, sometimes hour to hour in our daily lives, and that be when we're at work clinically and also in the educational setting where we work. Yeah.
Can I give an example of that, just to bring it to life a little bit, of a social justice issue that particularly impacts mental health?
Yeah, I guess, if I'm thinking, say, for example, about access to transport in rural communities. We're Sussex. Sussex is one of the biggest counties in the UK. And we have a big rural community where a major disadvantage, particularly for young people, is around accessing city centres, town centres, social spaces, school spaces, and the frustration and the tension that can come with lack of access to transport is a very for people who live in cities, sometimes don't always notice it, but it's the not noticing of the adversity that certain groups of people face or experience every day. So that's an example. Particularly, I'd say in relation to COVID, we can't really ignore COVID, can we? And the impact that that's had on isolation as well. So, yeah.
You said 2 or 3 things that really bounced out. So the first thing is that privilege of not noticing.
Yes.
And that's really, I think, key to it. So sometimes it can feel really uncomfortable when people point things out about certain advantages that certain populations have or disadvantages that others experience. And you sometimes see people almost feeling personally attacked by something when you point out advantage or disadvantage. But I think it's really important for us to just keep a real understanding of the fact that, these issues are structural issues a lot of the time, such as transport links, such as actual physical access to services. Yes. So not only do you have like the other issues, so social and psychological stuff that sometimes pushes people away from services or pushes services away from people, but you've also got this kind of like physical things that maybe people in cities who have access to underground buses, trains, all that sort of stuff, and maybe don't think about it, don't see. Yes. And I think one of the things that's really important for us as nurses, particularly in mental health, is to make sure that we see from other people's perspective. Yes. And it requires work, and it's hard to do sometimes. It's a bit knackering, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm talking to people, isn't it?
No, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say I completely agree. It's, half the battle is surfacing the issues, making people aware of it, and you can take things from there. I mean, going back to how we might define social justice, I think there's certainly issues around exposing and bringing attention, shining a light on specific issues and broader issues. And most of those issues will probably refer to issues around oppression of some kind or another. So I think, as educators and, hopefully we are stimulating our students to do what they can to bring about some kind of social change on the basis of that awareness, if that makes sense. So Lucy's example is a good one.
Yeah. Why do you think social justice is so important? Because you guys have all taken a stand around this issue. So why do you think it's so important for mental health? We're going to talk about it in terms of education in a moment. But why is social justice important to mental health and well-being?
I think that when we're having distressing experiences, for example, when our thoughts are challenging us or our thinking is challenging us, or we have a very embodied experience of a low mood, for example, a depression or a psychosis or a disturbance of sensory disturbances. Often, and this isn't new information, this is, we talk about embodied trauma, we talk about the embodiment of where power has exercised in our life, or where power has been in our lives, and how we hold that in our bodies and in our psyches. So in terms of mental health, I think we have to, if we just look at, for example, the confidential inquiry into suicide and self-harm, I'm just thinking about, if we talk about suicide and working age men, for example, and the types of injustices, social injustice that men of that age may face, for example, loss of employment, sometimes a loss of relationships when children are older, the services that aren't around for that specific group of people, the lack of social contact often from working, and then so I hope that's a good example, but thinking about that, what sort of injustices happen for people for different groups of people at different times across the lifespan, which obviously in nursing is where our interest is how we take care of people across the lifespan.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've got a nasty habit of interrupting you, Nicky. After you.
No, I was about to say, does anyone want to add anything to that? So go on, please.
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, just to support those comments, we are talking about possibly the most excluded group in society, and
Have we lost Warren?
We have. Just was about to say something too.
Yeah.
I think for us,
sort of democratic society, then it's every bit as important as learning clinical material, I would say.
Can you repeat it again? Because you froze a little bit there.
Oh, how far do I go back? I was just saying that, in the interest of promoting a socially democratic society, it's part of our role to, empower our service users as best we can when we know they're a very oppressed group, as a generalisation.
Yeah, I think we're looking at multiple issues too, aren't we? With things like race and culture and poverty. I think, Jamie, you were about to come in there for a second.
Yes, I mean, the other aspect of that is in terms of mental health, we most often say it is something that you don't see, and people have to be able to kind of tell us about their experiences and what they are going through. So you can find out that in some situations, we do have this group that still experience some levels of stigma, and most of them are really aware of that. And sometimes they are not able to come and tell us their experiences, let alone really ask for services. And in a sense, some of them are actually kind of deprived quietly in silence. And in mental health for ourselves as mental health nurses, as still I am a registered mental health nurse, is when you meet people, it's about listening to those experiences and what they are going through, and how sometimes you are able to minimize that deprivation of information for them and be able to actually work with them very well in a manner that you are able to kind of work with them in the sense that they are able to reduce some of the injustices that they are facing. But it is there, even though we are now in the 21st century, some of them still experience levels of stigma. And the work that was done by Time for Change, or Time to Change, I think that is now being stopped, because they were doing a lot of surveys about what this group really experienced in terms of what the general population experienced, things like easily going out or meeting people, which they were not easily able to do. And that work is being stopped because it was being sponsored by, I think, the lottery funds. And I think that was a very good resource for us to understand, or for that group for us to have been able to reach that group and be able to understand those forms of stigmas that they were facing.
Interesting that there's something so key, something so vital, such as don't take a population who is sick and make fun of them, exclude them from participating in society. And that's funded on lottery money, like money that can just go up in smoke. There's no strategy for making sure that everybody shares equally in society. I find that was really troubling. I mean, it's great to have lottery money, isn't it? Because it's better than no money. But there is something about what we choose to pay for and what we choose to think of as an added extra. So like fairness as an extra is a weird idea. Not a very fair idea, I think. So what do you think your role is as nurse educators then in talking about and role modelling some of these issues around social justice? We'll come to all of you to talk about that one because it's quite a big one.
I'm happy to talk about how we work in our third year. We think together about the different adversities that people have in connection with inequalities and social inequalities in particular. And we ask students to focus on specific groups. And the example I gave earlier was of working age men. So it may be people at risk of homelessness, vulnerably housed people, homeless people, and to read around the very specific adversities that we know that those groups face. But that's not really enough. We need to embody, we need to experience the listening that Jamie was talking about earlier, really listening to the experience of people that are not like us always or never. We're all so different. So how do we really listen? And so how at Brighton, what we've done is we've set up a closed group for mental health nurses in third year, where we practice sitting together in a meditative space and noticing, so a mindfulness practice really, but really sort of going quite deeply into who we are as individuals, but in silence, and then sharing and noticing the diversity within us, within our group, and how we can sit with that. And that's something that we've done to try and think about how we work with social justice in practice, and then think about how we transfer that knowing, that embodied knowing, to our practice, to our nursing practice across all many different organisations, as we know. Yeah.
What do you mean by embodied knowing? Because I'm sure there are people watching tonight who are like, is it better than ordinary knowing? What is it? Tell us a little
I don't think it's better than ordinary knowing. I think it's I think it's an important, but noticing in our bodies how when you're mentalizing, the practice that mental health nurses have, where you're trying to understand where you're coming from, and you're trying to understand that the other person is coming from somewhere different, and that space between us, and our bodies sometimes can tell us how we're feeling about a situation. Yeah, so we may feel slight tension in our chest, or we may feel nervous, or our hands may shake, or we may have a tension in our stomach, but it can tell us quite a lot about how we feel about what's happening in the moment. And does that answer your question, Nicky?
Yeah, I mean, I love it as a phrase, isn't it? Because we get taught that knowing is all about what's in your head, but actually it's what's in your heart, it's what's in your experience, it's what's happening between you and the other person. There's an interpersonal dimension to it as well. So there's lots of different ways that we can know and understand things. And I think in mental health, we're wise to pay attention to all of them.
Yeah. And Margaret Archer would allude to our emotional state, showing how we truly feel about a situation. So noticing our actions.
I feel like you're saying things that are really important as well.
Warren normally does.
I guess maybe we could come to you, Jamie, to talk a little bit about it until Warren comes back.
Yes.
The role of nurse educators are in social justice.
Yes. I mean, I do participate in Lucy's work as well in that model.
Reveal how we truly feel about us.
Carry on, Jamie.
Yes. So I participate in Lucy's model as well. But one of the areas that I have been actually able to work with that approach in terms of looking at widening participation is through the admission processes. I mean, we've talked about it, and it's only not just my own work, it's the work of the admissions office and all the administrators around it. So what happens is, if we receive an applicant who is within the WP demographics, it is actually indicated there. So what we do is we have to look at that application in all forms, in terms of, if we have to look at rejecting that application, it will have to be the very last resort. So what we do then in an application like that, if I'm looking at an application like that, we have to look at, for instance, there may be a lot of, they may not have been able to actually give a focus of their in their personal statement about why they want to come and study our course. So I will look at that. And what we've been able to do is we can call that individual and talk to them. And sometimes listening to them, they are able to give us the voice to what is in that paper. So sometimes the written part of it may not give a lot of voice to us. So I will call that individual, or I will arrange a meeting with them. And that meeting may be by what means they want to talk to me. Some people are not always wanting to come on the camera, and we respect that. And we have that even among our student groups who don't easily just come on the camera. They can prefer just to talk to you on the phone. So talking to that individual on the phone and explaining to them, and then kind of inviting them to the interview when they come is one of the aspects that we do. And sometimes we look at also the qualifications for entry. We've been able to review most of our entry qualifications, including now we've included the T levels, which will be starting as well, which have also already started because there have been a group that have started in that process. And we also have apprentices, and we also have registered nurse degree associates in that group. So for myself, even before the interview, sometimes when I look at such an application, I will call the individual the date before their interview. And most interviews does not necessarily have to be a question after question interview. Sometimes it's about listening to people's experiences, and you'll be able to understand their desires and their inspirations from what they are telling you. So we've been able to build those flexibilities and to enable us to use the approach of widening participation in our areas and in the neighboring counties, as well as when we receive applications all over the world.
But when you're talking about widening participation, what you're talking about is making sure that people from a wide range of backgrounds have the opportunity to go to and access university education. And in the past, that hasn't been true. And even now, there's still some significant barriers. So I guess some of the stuff you're talking about is this idea that not everybody gets the kind of encouragement or has had the kind of encouragement from school to even apply. I mean, I went to lots of different schools, and I can remember we had people in my year who were given a choice of the army or the local factory, and that's so unacceptable. But I think one of the things that you're really noticing, and one of the things I think so encouraging about the work that you're talking about, is actually looking to see people's potential and following up on it, saying, you know, you've put in this information. Is there anything else you can tell me that would help me make a good decision about whether you should come on the course? That idea about following people up and valuing them is really important, because not everybody understands how to fill in forms. Not everybody understands how important it is to give as much detail as possible. You have to have that told to you. And some people just don't have that information told to them, and they would make amazing nurses. And sometimes the forms can be a barrier to certain people, and we have to understand that process too, and trying to make it not kind of watering it down, but it is also making it accessible for them to be able to do that. And when we talk of and the access also doesn't just stop there. It's really when they are with us as well, because we have various monitoring or mentoring facilities within our courses, as how we work with students who are in that group, who may want for instance, if I'm a personal tutor for a student, I will tell them that, you know, if you have certain problems, I am here, be open with me. I'm a registered nurse. I practiced for nearly 18 years in the NHS. So that will help me kind of know how many times I can meet with them and how many times they can say, I want to talk to you today. And I can say, next hour, I will be available for you to talk to me. So these are all flexibilities that we have in our work with our students. As a mental health nurse and as an educator, those are the kind of things I will encourage people to participate in if they are able to do that. Brilliant. Well, you're right. No one is born knowing how to fill in a form. You get taught it, don't you? And to get judged on not being able to do it before someone's taught you, it seems very unfair somehow. I'd like to come back to Warren now, because I'm aware that every time you start saying something, we're all leaning in, then you freeze. So don't do it anymore, because we're all desperate to hear what it is you've got to say. So tell us a little bit about nurse education and social justice.
Yeah, I suppose we all have a slightly different role in the course, and I think it's been quite a privilege, I suppose, that I had a lot to do with the year one students to start off with, and as my experience has grown, I find myself working with the third years more now, I suppose. But in year one, suffice to say that the students are introduced to various theories. We talk about theories of power, labeling theories, etc., kind of all the classic theories, and also reflection, and then kind of rather like a spiral fashion. By the time we get to year three, so I guess there could be a kind of graded or escalated process between reflection, reflexivity, critical reflection. Well, each of those processes has their sort of values and so on. But by year three, I think my point is we're kind of hoping and expecting the students to think critically with the use of theory. So they're brought together in small groups to engage in reflective dialogue and writing, and to really just pick a subject that's bothered them. What's the stone in their shoe about a service user, or an element of the service, or an area of oppression or social injustice. And the idea being they get to reflect on that using theory and using the various tools that are at our disposal. So I'm sort of thinking about sort of double loop reflection, which gives us that extra wheel to draw in theory and use that in our critical thinking. Or maybe the Burrell and Morgan's map, if you come across that. But again, it's very helpful to be able to help us articulate what we're thinking. Sometimes we don't always have the words for it. But this valuable process of sort of putting theory with critical reflection, can produce results and change in individuals. And, it helps us to see more clearly sometimes. Sometimes it's when you're working somewhere and you're immersed in sort of ways of practice and group processes, it can be really hard to sort of see what's right or wrong. Again, attending to ourselves, our bodies, our emotions, reactions in others as well. These are all ways that help us to prompt us to think about these issues more deeply and hopefully move our practice on, if you like. So I think that's one of the sort of blend of approaches that I've been involved with that I think really does help students to see differently and act differently as well.
I don't think you can change unless you take time out specially to think about it. And one of the things about reflection that's so interesting is that if it's done well, it should result in action. People are, it's just going around in your head. Well, no, it's not. You missed out the last step if that's what you're doing. But let's come over to Dave now, because I can see questions pouring in. So brace yourselves, panel.
Yeah, Nicky. Hopefully I'm not going to miss any, but it's a hard task. The first one from Debbie Ridley, it was just, hi everyone, this is the first time I've actually been able to watch it live. So that's obviously lovely. Hi Debbie. Obviously, you don't have to watch it live. Anyone that misses an episode can get it through catch up on our different podcast and stream channels. Then the next comment was from Ben, long-time listener, and he's asked quite a kind of an important question. In this country, there are 100 people with learning disabilities who have been locked away for over 20 years in institutions. Why do you think people with a learning disability and the injustices they face get so little solidarity from social justice campaigners? So I don't know if anyone feels they've got any views to share on that really knotty issue.
I'll say a little. Yeah, I'm just so glad that that's come up actually, Dave, because it's something, Winterbourne Review. I can't remember when that happened, but it was when was it? Help me out, guys. Was it 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, around about that.
Yeah. Okay. And the learning that's come from that, and how we use that within the curriculum. And we've lost many learning disability nurses. The courses for learning disability nurses have reduced. So I'm sort of completely glad that it's been brought up. I don't know why. We continue to face, just with COVID, if we've seen the impact that's been there for people with learning disabilities, it's been greater than other sectors of the population. I don't know why, but I know it's something that that people are motivated to talk about as students. We've had requests from year 3 specifically to have more sessions around learning disability. And so, yeah, I don't even know if that answers your question, but I'm glad it's been brought up.
Yeah, just to add to that, I guess, done it again.
Vibe. I was saying Winterbourne was 2012, Lucy, 5 years ago. I know.
Whoa.
Go on, Warren, what we can say.
Thank you.
Well, we talked earlier about, hidden populations, vulnerable populations, and they don't always have a voice, a collective voice. And again, it would be our job, people like us, people in our kind of helping professions, to pipe up and advocate for those hidden populations. I would attribute these issues to a lack of voice and people who are away from the public eye.
And I think as educators as well, changing attitudes, positive behavioural support is where we're focusing, learning more for mental health nurses, thinking about the function of behaviours that we're seeing, and reframing those within reflective practice, and taking that learning into placement as well, and thinking with colleagues. That's the benefit of working in nurse education, thinking right across services about how we think about behaviours that we see, and understand them within the context of learning disability and mental health, how we understand those intersections.
Yeah. I think as well, some people are taught that from absolutely the first moment they really can realise anything, that they are not worthwhile. And people imbibe that stigma within themselves as well sometimes. And so they don't know to ask. They don't have that expectation because society keeps telling them and keeps devaluing them. And you kind of just take it inside yourself, which is a horrible kind of poison, isn't it, to have? Dave, I can see there's more questions. Thank you, Ben, for that one.
Yes, there is. Ohenowa has said people would like to speak about their experiences, but due to stigma, they are unable to speak out. Alfonso has raised the question, in terms of a social justice youth development framework, how best could we support LGBTQ plus youth and LGBTQ plus young students?
I was going to try and channel one of our groups from university last year if they were here, because they did a specific project around LGBTQI, and the key messages. Well, of course, it's not a homogenous group. There's so much difference within. So because in nursing, we're always thinking about person-centered care, the individual experience and our own, how we listen. So I can't remember the question now, but have I answered it at all?
It was about LGBTQI, particularly young people, and what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about all sorts of groups. There's all sorts in Brighton who I would refer to as the experts. Yeah.
I think again it might boil down to creative ways of empowering people and giving voice to specific groups that maybe feel that they don't have much of a voice, and just again recognizing those basic principles of equity, access, participation, and acknowledging their rights.
Jamie, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I mean, we have these questions arising all the time. At least we the acknowledgement there is because people kind of experience social injustices. In a society as it is, we'll not be questioning people's gender any longer. People should be accepted as what they want to be and be able to participate in the society and in the communities that they live, regardless of their gender. In our university, of course, we support that. One of our principles, one of our values is no one gender is better than the other. Everybody is equal. Every gender is equal in participation in our education, and their participation is as important as anyone else. So why that question arises is the fact that if people may notice that, for instance, they feel disadvantaged, and this is what I was talking about, that participation. So when they come into the universities, what groups are there which are not segregated from any other group in the student groups for them to participate in and feel welcome in the university? Because same as we're talking about learning disability, learning disability exists, or disability exists when we are putting barriers in places. We should be able to limit the barriers so that people don't feel that there are barriers because of a particular condition that they are experiencing. Our institution has worked very, very hard in this direction in empowering everyone's participation in all our activities in the university.
I think where sometimes the wheels come off the pram a bit with this is that we've still got that legacy of people thinking that to be a good nurse is to be completely neutral, and professionalism is sort of like this stony silence, when you can't have a society where people are well if people can't join into it. So there is the real need for a framework, I think, as Alfonso said, and as you guys have all said, in that we need a strategy so that when people come into a situation, they know, they can see from everything from lanyards, maybe having the rainbow on, maybe clear signposting for all the student groups that you can join. When people come to look at our curriculums, they are looking at examples which feature all different kinds of people in all different kinds of parts of society. And we're having these conversations because I think one of the things that's really important about a university is that it facilitates growth, mind growth. So some people will come to a university, maybe in their head, they think they've never met a person who is gay before. Or they don't have very much experience with people who weren't born in this country if they've come from a place where it's very monocultural. So being able to sort of safely allow people to express themselves and to develop, because the whole point of being at university is it's a process of becoming, isn't it? You become more yourself, who you're going to be. It's great to get a qualification. It's great to get professional identity, but it's really about who you are and who you want to become as well. You know, it's like a paddling pool before you get thrown into the ocean of life, isn't it? It's expensive, but you know what I mean. So I think we do need to have frameworks in place to allow these kind of conversations, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, we could relate that to, the principles of Paulo Freire and his ideas about universities as cultural, democratic, political spaces to help people to feel more engaged with the issues. Become more critically conscious, I think.
I can see time ticking on, so let's get through some more of these questions, Dave. Come on, call us to order.
Okay. So Desrina has said people need to be mindful of what they say and how they respond to certain situations because you never know what people are going through. Adrian said social justice should not just be a mental health nurse issue. It's the essence of nursing and healthcare as a whole. Advocacy and justice are key. Ethical and moral principles, and without diverse mechanisms like positive discrimination, how else can we make sure inclusion and diversity is core to health and society? And then I think linked into that quite nicely was a comment from Rory, and that was about what role for nurse unions to promote social justice. And obviously, absolutely. And I kind of think about the work that trade unions and professional organisations are doing on social justice. And I suppose, that kind of piece linking into what Ben said earlier about trying to push for changes that hopefully will impact on all those in society that face, social injustice. I think one of the things that I find kind of quite interesting is the difficulty that we face at the moment, where we've obviously got a government and leaders in that government who are very kind of disinterested in social justice. And I think one of the examples was it yesterday or the day before, rushing from a lavish party where, people were spending £35,000 for the opportunity to play cricket with the Chancellor, to rush back to the Houses of Parliament and vote through a change that would impact on, some of the poorest in society, so they wouldn't be able to kind of save any assets if they were poorly later in life. And, how that all kind of fits together. And, if I had any hair left, I'd be tearing it out at some of the problems that we're currently facing in society. I suppose in terms of working with the future, the leaders of tomorrow, the students that are coming up into, the nursing professions, how do you kind of, fill them with that kind of passion to be able to go forth and demand social change, social justice change? Have you got any kind of thoughts on that one?
How do we live it? I felt like Nicky sort of really, that was very key what you said just now, Nicky, around safety. How do we create? We have to also be bold, and we have to go into places that don't always feel psychologically safe. And I'm sure we've all had experience of that, of needing to advocate for service users, for people we work alongside in sometimes very difficult situations and oppressive situations. And it's how are we, I was thinking about Catherine Gamble then. She talks about your lifeboat, doesn't she? About, or she who have you got with you? Who can you discuss social justice issues with, who can help you critically think and reflect around what you're seeing and noticing in a way that then empowers you as a nurse to confidently stride into situations where you are not always having an equal voice, at the table, and we are often in forums publicly and clinically, where we can sometimes feel quite frustrated at the lack of tinkering with mechanisms that will help realign some justice issues that come up for us every day, I would say. I was talking to a substance misuse team today about older adults and substance misuse and the difficulty accessing detox services, and how there seems to be this discrimination for people, older adults, and that's age. That's under the Equality Act. We know that's we're all striving to work within the Equality Act, and yet we've got systems in place that don't allow us to move forward with that. But we don't stop, we don't give up and go, okay, let's just focus on the individual now. We come back together and we find ways of reflecting and thinking about theories that can help us develop how we communicate with systems. Does that sound fair, Warren and Jamie?
Very fair, yeah.
The conversations that we have together.
In support of Lucy and responding to Dave's point, I think, the drive is already there, largely.
Yeah.
People are attracted to nursing, social work, psychology. I mean, very often there is a sense of dissonance with these issues. Yeah. And it's really about helping people to develop their own voice and articulate that in a lot of ways. That would be my response. Jamie?
Yes, just to add to that, I would say it's there has been a lot of information out there in terms of social injustice, and if we can even just link that to the movement, the young people's movement in climate change, that's also a very good platform that young people have used. And in terms of places around mental health for young people as well. And I'll link this in terms of learning disability being combined in mental health. In children's services now, in adolescent services, there has been this awareness for nurses working there that they can do specific training as well in areas of autism, and so that you can understand the conditions a lot better. I mean, my personal view there, this is not supported by any theory, that the fact that I who may not really understand learning disability or someone's disabilities very much, particularly people with multiple disabilities, and I as a registered mental health nurse, we have to attend holistically to them. I think I'll be limited. And this is my personal view. So our colleagues in learning disability, really, the fact that they are no longer trained in that area, it should be an area that I think I would recommend that they look at again, particularly in the many years as we've seen, the level of the conditions around those areas that have increased as well. But having said that, we also have to give them a voice. They have a voice. We are aware of these issues. And when they have access to our university and when they are with us, it's also that platform is there. They can use it to share those information and empower themselves. That is very important. And also, sometimes in some cases, we have come into, there has been issues wherein we have to also work with listen to the immediate mom on that who makes a call. Of course, we do maintain confidentiality and we want that person to be an individual for themselves. But where it is necessary, sometimes we may listen to that call and just say, okay, I will talk to that individual. So those are the simple instances wherein you can allow the person to be themselves and make decisions and be able to aware of how they can actually improve themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring in the comment from Desrina, who kind of fed back on this issue. As a student adult nurse, I believe in order to understand how to tackle a situation, we must first learn the process. We should educate ourselves about social injustice issues. It gives us more understanding and knowledge about the topic. Also, we shouldn't just be learners, but also doers by setting an example, being a role model and sharing ideas. So I think that kind of really nicely brings some of those themes together. Just on the issue of learning disability nursing, I've tweeted the story from Nursing Times. The University of East Anglia this week has taken the decision to effectively end its learning disability nurse course because of a drop in year-on-year applications. And I think, that's really depressing, especially at a time when Ruth May, the Chief Nursing Officer for England, and Mark Radford, the Chief Nurse at Health Education England, had been kind of like doing a lot of work to promote the importance of learning disability nursing. And I sit on the Learning Disability Nursing National Group in England that are kind of looking at some of these issues. So it's a really kind of retrograde step that we've seen there. I also just wanted to say a quick shout out to someone that's been posting on the Uniting Health Facebook page. Astrid's asked a few questions tonight. I think one of them just if you've got a few seconds to share some thoughts, does lived experience help or hinder careers?
I can go.
Go on, Lucy.
I'd say it helps. If I had a very short answer, I'd say that and I don't know, I think I've changed over the years. I don't know whether I always would have said that, and maybe that's societal change as well. But hearing from students, we have some incredible students with lived experience and staff as well in Brighton, and use it and an awareness of how you experience that. How you experience the adversities that you experience, whether it's internal or external, and how we talk about post-traumatic growth, don't we now? We talk about how we survive in recovery. We may have, when an adversity comes our way, we will go into a survival mode, and then at some point we start to thrive, and that point may even be going to university or accessing education. And I absolutely would say our students that are brave and bring lived experience are really valued on our course.
Really positive thing to hear. I think looking at how fast time has run away with us again, we're going to have to come to you for your last thoughts. And so, Warren, do you have any last ideas that you'd like to just make sure that we've got before we move to an end?
I guess it sort of goes from the awareness to the understanding to the doing something about it, really. And, I've said it many times at careers days and all, but I do love it when a student picks up a board and marches about an issue or protests or has something to say, and we can all do our bit to influence legislation or policy or just our colleagues' practice. And I love that tweet, which was about taking it that step forward and being active about social justice issues.
Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it, to feel powerful, and we shouldn't be making students feel like they're not powerful, because they are. Absolutely, they are. Just look at the NSS. Jamie, is there anything you wanted to leave people with?
What I would leave everybody with is the fact that you should also, we learn from our experiences, and our experiences tells us a lot about what are our needs, and also be able to reflect on them, and for us to be able to support each other in those experiences and work together to have a fairer society.
Lucy?
I think for me, it's be okay with making mistakes. And we're all, there's so many people, we feel strongly this is an emotive subject, and we won't all get it right all the time. And use that and use reflection and groups and teams to come back to taking learning from mistakes that we make, and keep going.
Yeah. Dave, anything from you?
Nothing from me about tonight's episode, but just to remind everyone that obviously with our weekly episodes, next week we have got Paul DeBuff, who's going to be talking about trauma-informed addiction services. So obviously, hopefully people will think that's a great topic to join in with next week at 7 p.m. So that's my closing thought on tonight, Nicky.
Absolutely. So this is a massive topic. So thank you to those people who've joined in tonight. I think we're at the start of this conversation, not the end. We'll have to revisit it, I think, at some point. But thank you so much to our guests, Lucy and Warren and Jamie, for sharing their thoughts on social justice with us tonight. Good night, all.
Yeah.
Good night.
Night.
Mm-hmm.